Greetings. My name is Stuart Mars, percussion teacher at the University of Maine, and I am delighted to be able to share with you some preparation tips and demo performances for the 2020 Maine All-State Percussion Auditions. There are 4 videos in this set: the tenor solo number 4 that everyone prepares, and separate videos for the whaley etudes for snare drum, timpani, and mallets. I hope you find them useful in preparing for your audition, and if you need to contact me with any questions, my contact information is below in the description section. In the meanwhile, best of luck and happy practicing. Cymbals. Tanner presents us with several typical cymbal playing situations, each requiring its own technical approach. The first are these 3 huge fortissimo cymbal crashes. In order to get a full spectrum of frequencies from the crash and to avoid the dreaded air pocket, you must flam the cymbal edge when playing the loud crash. Great cymbal players have used a variety of approaches to achieve the flam, but I like the low to high one that goes like this. So in slow motion, just so you see what's going on. I hold the top cymbal flat, relatively flat, and I drive the edge up of the bottom one, and it flips automatically. I don't have to turn my hand. It flips the cymbals like that. I end in this heart shape because it looks good, and then suspended like this for resonance. So the flam, the good looks, the resonance. That's what we're going for here. For the very loud crashes. Then the next one is a piano crash with a crescendo to mezzo forte. For the piano crashes, you want to lightly and briefly scrape the cymbals to make the same kind of broad attack as you had with the loud crash, but at a piano dynamic. Then for the crescendo up to mezzo forte, you slowly increase the flam. This takes a lot of practice to do well, so don't be discouraged if it doesn't come out right on the first try. But here they are, scraping together. Now, if I do them in time with the music, then the next one are the staccato notes. The staccato are executed the same way as the big crash, except you pull it into your stomach to muffle it right after you make the flam. So it sounds like this. So it's the same way. I'm going to play it down instead of up because it's easier to bring in this way. But I'm still getting that same flam. All right, so there's my staccato crash into the gut. Then for the piano, it's the same thing. You just play the little crash, scraping a little bit, and then into the stomach. And there you have those crashes. Tambourine. There are various techniques that could be used to play this part. I'm going to show you one here which could be considered typical. I will use a thumb roll for the piano section and a shake roll for the loud section. So here's the thumb roll. Nice soft roll, ending it with a collapse of the wrist. Now, this is a Neil Grover Pro Percussion roll ring. It's basically sandpaper stuck to the top of the head, which makes it very easy to play a thumb roll. You could also use rosin, base bow rosin, or beeswax, or lick your thumb. If you're going to lick your thumb, make sure you're the only one playing the tambourine. But this roll ring makes it easy. You know, you don't want to do it a whole lot because it's sandpaper. You'll sand away your fingerprint. But for occasions like this, it comes in very handy. That's the thumb roll. Now I'm doing the thumb roll with my left hand, even though I'm right-handed, because next comes a shake roll that I prefer to do with my right hand. Okay, so I start and end the roll with the stroke with the loud rolls. This is coming off. Start and end the rolls with strikes. Your fist, bird's beak, anything to give you articulation. Okay, so that's all there is to the tambourine. Make sure you give it a good punch for the beginning of the shake roll. I like to shake the roll to get a full sound like this, rather than back and forth. I like that kind of roll. It's not the easiest one to get, but once you get it, I think you get a nice sound out of it. All right. As for bells, which is the next section, there's not much that needs to be said about the bell part, except that you should be sure to use bell mallets, either brass or very hard plastic, which is what I'm using in the demonstration for this. Suspended cymbal. Tanner specifies first snare drum stick and then soft sticks. For the first two measures, use a snare drum stick you don't mind getting dinged up, because you're going to hit the edge of the cymbal with the shank and then muffle immediately with the other hand, thumb on top, fingers spread out on the bottom. Since the next measures are mezzo forte and rhythmic, you can play with the bead of the stick on the cymbal. So the first one's on the shank like this, 1, 2, 1, 2. Then the next measures with the bead, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, if you need more articulation, because this is too ringy, you could do a partial muffle with your fingers. 1. That hit the shank of the stick. I didn't want to do that. 1. To get more articulation, and you can control it in different ways. 1, 2, 3. And you definitely want to let it vibrate at the end. That's what LV stands for. All right. Then you switch to soft mallets. And these are soft marimba mallets. You don't want to hear the beating of the mallets on the cymbal. 1, 2. Now, notice that I use the mallets themselves to help make a faster diminuendo. Because if I just let the decay of the cymbal naturally, it's going to go more than 3 beats. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, it might work. It might work, but I can always use the mallets themselves or my fingers to help feather down the diminuendo. 1, 2. All right, and then muffle. Bass drum. This is a moderately rhythmically articulate bass drum part, so you will need to use smaller beaters than you would for a march, for example. If you can hold the beaters with traditional snare drum grip, you'll find it easier to play the mezzo forte single stroke roll in the beginning of the piece. For the roll, make sure the 2 beaters are equidistant from the rim of the bass drum, and use your hands, or potentially your knee, to control the reverberation of the head for the rhythmic part. So here's the roll. Just roll fast enough to keep the sound going. Doesn't have to be a double stroke roll, doesn't have to be very fast, but equidistant, not one in the middle and one on the edge, but same distance from the edge. And then for the rhythmic part, you're going to control it with your knee. 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 3. So you could use your knee or your hand to play the articulate, unaccented notes that would get lost. It would sound like a roll if I didn't muffle it at all. So either my hand or my knee. Okay? Timpani. Without getting into details that can take years to perfect, here are some points to consider as you prepare this section of the tanner. First of all, ensure the drums are in tune before you begin the solo. I went over this in the tuning section for the Whaley timpani etude. You might want to listen to that section about tuning. C and the G. Play the drums on the beating spot of each drum, about 1/4 of the way from the edge to the center. So there's the edge to the center, halfway, 1/4 of the way. So the beating spot about 1/4 of the way from the edge to the center. It's going to be a little farther in on this drum, a little closer to the rim on this drum because they're different diameters. For sticking, Well, let's just, before we go on to sticking, about the beating spot, listen to what it sounds like if you play in the center. And listen to what happens if you play right on the rim. So the beating spot is where we get the typical timpani sound. There are special effects that composers use. If you listen to my Carter recordings, you'll hear me playing on the center and on the very rim, because Carter calls for those extended techniques. But traditional timpani sound is 1/4 of the way in, from the edge to the center. 1/8 of the way across the diameter, of course. For sticking, start each 16th note figure with the hand closest to the drum you're moving to. So these are grouped in twos. So with a group of two, if I'm moving from this drum to that drum, I start with the hand closest. If I'm moving from this drum to this one, there are two, I start with the hand closest. So it looks like this. I'm always moving with the hand closest to the drum I'm going to, if they're grouped in twos. There aren't any in here, but if you had triplets, you'd start with the opposite hand to move from drum to drum. In the third line on page 8, the first measure, lightly muffle both drums on the third beat so you can hear the piano crescendo entrance on the first beat of the next measure. So here's the first two measures of the third line of page 8. 1. So I killed the second beat. 1, 2, 3. That way you can hear the piano roll entrance. If I didn't do that, the piano roll entrance would be covered up. And you wouldn't be able to hear that entrance very well. And then your roll should be a single stroke roll on timpani, not a double stroke roll. So make sure you use a single stroke roll like this. I use a finger technique. Others don't, but I do. And you only need to roll as fast as required to sustain the vibrating head. So for piano, it can be very slow. And then as I make the crescendo, I can make the crescendo by speeding up the roll as I get louder. Okay, so that's pretty much rolls, and that'll help you prepare this section. Let me play that last three measures in time. 1, 2, 3. And notice that I muffled the C when I played the G, so I don't end up with a chord at the end. Triangle. Hold the triangle with a good clip, good drum clip, not a shoelace, at eye level. Strike the triangle on the bottom leg at an angle to the plane of the triangle to produce lush overtones. So here's an angle, here's the plane, an angle to the plane. So I'm striking the triangle at an angle because we want all of those overtones. We don't want it to sound like a dinner bell, like that. Any triangle will work this way. This happens to be a pretty good one, but the Grover makes really good ones too. So that's how you get a good single stroke on the triangle. Then for the roll, it's a crescendo roll. So you're going to want to start with the tip of the triangle beater in the corner and then move it in. Snare drum. So starting off with the flams, I'm going to recap what I said about flams here, what I said about flams in the whaley section, because unless you auditioned on snare drum, you may not have seen it. I'm going to paste that in here. Flams. I would like to talk about this rudiment with you briefly because I often find it is poorly understood. It consists of a real note and a grace note. The real note is played the same way you would play a single note on the snare drum with a full stroke. The grace note, however, is executed differently. It is a very soft and subtle tap of its stick on its way up into the full stroke pattern to play the next real note. So the grace note is like this, coming up to play the next real note. The grace note, if I play this flam, so one really loud note or one full stroke note and the other just a tap on the way up to play the next one on the other hand. No matter what the dynamic of the real note is, the grace note maintains that soft, subtle character. So it is not really two notes. Rather, it is one note with an embellishment to make it a bit fatter. It takes some practice to get right, but once you do, it becomes second nature to execute it with a great sound. Those are loud, soft. The grace note is very soft. Rolls. Your rolls should serve to sustain the snare drum sound. So within the roll, you should not be able to discern any particular rhythm. That means we want to try to hide the rhythm of hand-to-hand motion. The speed of the hand-to-hand motion should be determined by the density of the buzz and the dynamic. Here's the basic rule. The softer the roll, the slower the hand-to-hand motion, and the denser the buzz. The louder the roll, the faster the hand-to-hand motion, and the less dense the buzz. This is an arrhythmic continuum, so you have to be able to keep track of the regular pulse while freeing up the hand-to-hand motion to make a good roll sound. So here's what I'm talking about. The density is the number of bounces per hand. So in the very soft, there are many bounces per hand. And as I get louder, the hand-to-hand speed increases. And notice that there are fewer bounces per hand, which makes it less dense. slower hand speed, more dense. Louder and faster hand speed. So for a good roll, you don't move the hands in rhythm. In fact, many great players try to find odd rhythmed hand motions to hide the sound of their hands. So instead of a quarter note being 4/16 notes of hand motion, they'll make it 5 or 3. So a quarter note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my hand motion. So it's a quintuplet hand motion to make it a smooth sounding roll. For the snare drum part in the tanner, you have several different rolls of length. One roll is forte, so that's going to be less dense. I did that one with 7. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 1. Now more dense is like diminuendo, and very, very dense on the piano. And this is going to be a quintuplet. 1, 2, 1. Nice, smooth, dense quintuplet. Now, dynamics. There are 5 dynamic levels in this section. You should ensure that each one is audibly different, with fortissimo being very loud and pianissimo as soft as you can play. That's the very last 2 notes. Right? So forte, very loud, and pianissimo, as soft as you can get it. Some people talk about distance from the head. That might work for you. The pianissimo should be very close to the head, and the fortissimo can be very high.